Hello, friends. This is Doc Granger with 360 News. I'm proud to introduce Joan Thomas and the latest segment of A Closer Look. Joan has a special way of bringing local stories to life, not only for our entertainment, but for our understanding. This week, Joan's guest is Tim Turner, curator of the Upson Historical Society. Some guests bring information, some bring memories, and every now and then, someone brings a way of seeing things that helps the rest of us look a little closer. Tim Turner is one of those voices. This segment is not only about where he has been or what he has done, it is about the perspective that comes from paying attention to people, to place, to history, and to the quiet details many of us pass by without noticing. So let's pull up a chair, slow the room down a little, and spend some special time with Joan Thomas and Tim Turner on A Closer Look.
Behind the walls of the Pettigrew Stamps White House, one of Thomaston's most historic homes, are the stories of generations, stories nearly forgotten, carefully preserved, and waiting to be told. Today, I sit down with Tim Turner, curator of the Upson Historical Society, to talk about the people, places, and memories that shaped this community. Tim, for people who may not know you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved with the Upson Historical Society.
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me today. I've always been interested in history all my life. I started actually when I was 12, researching my own line, and how that started. Um, my grandmother used to take me to go see this lady named Cunethel, and I used to think surely her mom and daddy did not name her Cunethel. So I asked my grandmother, where did she get her name? And she said, well, my grandmother said when she was young, her name was Cousin Ethel. And then when my grandmother married in the 30s, she became Cousin Ethel. And then she became Cunethel. So in the South, we start off with cousin, but then it becomes Cun. So Cunethel married Cunalton. And I wanted to know how we were related to them. And so my grandmother told me I actually wasn't related to Cunethel. I was related to Cunalton on my great grandfather's side. So that started me doing research on my family. Uh, when I started, I had three grandparents and one great grandmother still living, and I was constantly asking them questions, going around the kitchen with a pen and paper and, asking about their parents and their grandparents. And my great grandmother said, Tim, why do you want to know all this stuff? And I said, well, one day you may not be here, and I want to know it now. So that sort of jump started my love of history. And then it branched out from there to not only doing my families, but the families that actually came through this area. So, of course, one of my families that I have done a ton of research on is the Trice line, and they're from Upson County. They're one of the first families that came here. So I would come to Thomaston. I live in Barnesville, but I would come to Thomaston and see my family here, the Colquitts. And I would ask, how are we related to them? How are we related to them? And we would go to the cemeteries and I would write down information. And that snowball just started. And I caught the genealogy bug and I've still got it. So when the opportunity came for me to become the curator of the PWS house, I jumped on it and I'm glad I did because I love it.
Well, I think a lot of people hear the word curator and they're not exactly sure what that means. So, what does the curator at the Historical Society actually do day to day?
Well, we're sort of like if like the treasurer of a church, you're the curator of those funds, you're the steward of those funds, and I'm like that at the PWS house. The things that we have in our house, everything there comes from Thomaston and Upson County. So it's my job to make sure that it's all taken care of, it's inventoried, and it's displayed properly. We have different exhibits there, and they're all categorized, and we have display cases, and everything in it is from this area.
Well, it's the Pettigrew White Stamps House, right?
Yes,
Okay, I
yes.
think I got that right.
PWS, yes.
PWS.
Yeah.
It houses the Historical Society, right?
Yes, our headquarters are there. We our headquarters are there, but we also are a part of the Thomaston Upson Archives too.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet there. We also meet at the Senior Center when we have our meetings once a month.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story of that home?
Sure, be happy to. In 1833, John Pettigrew got the lot where the house used to sit. If you know where United Bank is, the house used to be kind of where the drive-through is, but it faced Church Street. And in 1970, the Historical Society purchased a lot from Mrs. Sweat up where it sits now at 800 South Church Street. And in 1971, they actually moved the house. They were going to the house was going to be torn down. And so the Historical Society, and they were just organized in 68. So they were very young, but they felt the need to save the house. It's Thomaston's second oldest home, and it was constructed about 1833. And so in 1971, they picked it up on the back of a flatbed truck and cut it in portions and moved it out to the current location where it is now. The house at one time, of course, used to be detached because homes in that time period, if a fire started in the kitchen, they didn't want it to spread to the rest of the house. So it used to be detached. And of course, they extended it, the back of the house, to the kitchen. Ironically enough, the house did catch on fire, and John Pettigrew sold the house to Benjamin White. And Benjamin White is the one that owned it when the house caught on fire. And he felt the need for a fire department. So he started the first fire department here. So the house went from the White family to the Stamps family. And then, of course, the Historical Society owns it now, and it's run as a house museum. It's very rare to have a house museum in your town. There's not that many in the state, actually.
You know, I've been there a few times, and when I've gone in, it always makes me feel like I've stepped back in time. Do you find that other people, or do you feel something special when you go in?
Absolutely. I love it. Ironically, I live in a home that's about that same age. So I live in a museum and I work in a museum. So it's pretty special to me. But yes, when you walk in, it literally is like you are stepping back in time. The house is staged like a house from that time period. The colors match, and we have exhibits. Believe it or not, we do actually have furniture that belonged to the White and Stamps family in the house. So if Benjamin White was to come back and step in the house, he would say, "Hey, I'm home. You know, there's some of my furniture there." So yes, it's a neat place. It really is.
Do you ever wonder maybe what went on in the house in years past? You ever think about that?
All the time. When I'm working there and I'll walk through the house, I'll think, you know, whose bedroom was this, or what actually happened in this room? You know, I know a house changes over 150 years, so I'm sure the way some of the things we have in the house are not the way that the family had. But I've always wondered what they would think if they came back to see what the house looks like. But it's a wonderful house. The walls are tongue and groove heart pine about this big, and not sheetrock. You can still see the original boards on the house. So we've tried to keep it as authentic as we can.
Well, are there any rooms that fascinate you personally? I know the kitchen is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is. And actually, the kitchen is staged as what a typical kitchen would be during World War II. About 3 years ago, the house took on a different transition. It was taken from an 1840s, 50s home to a 1940s home. And everything in the house was staged like during World War II because we're on the Georgia World War II Heritage Trail. And so everything in the house looked like that. And the kitchen, which you're talking about, has, of course, the Hoosier cabinet. It has a refrigerator, the stove. Everything is straight out of the 40s, and we kept that room. Actually, we just got through painting the inside of the home, but we kept the back two rooms exactly like the 40s. If you step out of the kitchen, there's the room that has the radio that you would have the fireside chats with FDR, and we have one of the nurses' uniforms that she would have worn during the war, and we also have a wedding dress from that time period. So yeah, those two rooms are pretty neat. One of the rooms that I like probably has to be what would be the living room. has things in there that are from, of course, like I said, the families there, but it's staged to where if you walk right in, it's like you're stepping back in time and you can just kind of grab a book and sit next to the fire and read it. We have different books from different authors from Upson County that are in a sort of like a break front bookcase there. So that one's my favorite room, I think.
And you have a newspaper, right?
We do have a newspaper for talking about from World War II.
Right. That's what I saw.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, it's
Interesting.
sitting right on the chair next to the old radio, and it says that the war is over.
Yes. I wonder who donated that, or do you know?
I don't know. It was in the house when I got there, so I don't know.
Do you think that people today, young people, do you think they can even imagine what life was like back then?
No, they have no clue. They absolutely have no clue. My grandparents, my grandmother told me what it was like during World War II, and she said they literally had nothing. They would get the war rationing books, and that's what they would take to the store if they needed something: sugar, meat, flour. But she also said that people took care of each other. So you would depend on your neighbor for something, and vice versa. So it was a very tight knit. I think Thomaston was a very tight knit community, and I don't think today that people would even know what that means.
Right.
You used to be able to borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor. You don't see that anymore.
No, you don't.
No.
Well, is it important that we preserve our local history?
Absolutely. I don't know who said it, but the saying is you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And I think it's so important to preserve where we've been, our heritage, everything about it. I constantly am doing research. I'm constantly taking notes. I love interviewing people like what you're doing and talking about different things in Thomaston and Upson County. But I think it's important that we know where we came from. And I think that's one of the things also that drives me when I do family research, because I want to know more. I want to know every detail about it. I want to know what their life was about. And those little anecdotal notes are so important to know someone's personality and what it was like when they lived during their time period. So I think it's very important that we preserve our past. And so many times people want to tear things down. That's why I'm so glad the Historical Society saved that house, because if they didn't, it wouldn't be here now.
Well, are there things that people donate, or that I think I saw several things that someone had donated? Is that correct?
Yes, you can donate it. In fact, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a lady who called me. No, she emailed me, from North Carolina, and she had a quilt that was actually made here in Thomaston. And she asked if we, the Historical Society, would like to have it. I said,
saw that.
yeah, it's on the bed in the bedroom.
States.
And it's incredible. I don't know how to sew. I don't have a clue how to do it, but the detail on this quilt is amazing. This lady did it, and she outlined each piece, outlined each state, has the bird and the state flower, the date of the state, and it's all in chronological order. So I'll be putting that out actually on Facebook for the 250th celebration for the country, so people can see it. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But we have a lot of people who will donate things, particularly when the house was set up as a World War II museum. We had a lot of families that donated their letters from World War II, and we were able to house those and display those. But we have a lot of people who donate, and I'm very appreciative of that.
I was just thinking about letters that people used to write. Those are something you can save. Can't really save emails like that. So there is something to be said about pen and paper.
Absolutely. And the penmanship of that
Oh,
time
yes.
was absolutely
Yes.
incredible. I have letters that my great-grandparents wrote to each other when they were courting. And I wouldn't take anything for them, but they're very flowery and very,
Yes.
very well written. And I like, one of the things that's fascinating to me is when I read letters, they're talking about people, and I want to find out who they're talking about. I also have Civil War letters that were actually written right here in Upson County from my Colquitt ancestors. My ancestor was the first man to get killed in the Battle of Gettysburg, and he actually left here and visited a brother in Alabama, and he signed up there. But I have the letters that were written that he wrote back to his wife, back and forth. And I also have the letter that the guy who was in the field with him when he took a mini ball in the head, when he was dying, he wrote back to his wife, Elizabeth. They lived at the Rock. and wrote about his passing. So I think something like that is so important. And I go to estate sales and I go to antique stores and I think, man, that is just family history right there. I want to get it back to the families, but so many times things just go in the trash, unfortunately.
Yeah, and when you mentioned penmanship, my mother, if she were still here today, would be 100 this year. She had the most beautiful handwriting. So did my grandmother. I just don't see that. I don't think anybody writes in cursive anymore anyway. So
Well, everything's typed
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
There's nothing written. When I'm doing research on deeds or wills or anything like that, it was the men who wrote those, and their penmanship was
Yes.
beautiful too. Actually, the way they looped and everything. Today, my
Yeah.
children, my youngest daughter, she doesn't write in cursive. It just wasn't taught in school. So, she signs her name, but she doesn't write in cursive. And to me, that's such a lost art.
I know. I think it's so sad. Has working with history like you do changed the way you look at small town history?
Yes. I think a lot of times when you look at the history of a small town, it's completely different than looking at the history of a city like Atlanta, where you have people who have left and become famous. In small towns, they're famous for what they do here. And I think that needs to be preserved. So I think the history of a small town is just as important as the history of a larger city, because it tells a story. And I think that story needs to be told. And I think it needs to be recorded and kept.
I know I didn't grow up in Thomaston either, but we were the mule capital of the world for a long time. But I don't know very much about that. Other than what I read. So I think it's really important that we have the responsibility to protect the stories of people who aren't here to tell them anymore.
Absolutely. We're also one of the largest peach producers during the war,
Mm-hmm.
during World War II. Not many people know that. So it's very important to keep these stories and tell them again.
I agree. What do you hope that the Upson Historical Society becomes in the future? Are there plans to continue like we are?
Well, you know what? This train is going, and it's going down the track. We're very active, and I like that. I really do. I have a great board, and we have fantastic members. The Upson Historical Society is responsible for the Pettigrew White Stamps House Museum. They're also sort of help manage the African American Museum and also Andrews Chapel Schoolhouse, which is out in the county. If you've
Yes.
never been there,
Yes.
that is a neat place. In fact, we just had the Sacred Heart singing there not too long ago, and that was our membership barbecue. But we have different events all through the year. We just had the big event where we installed a Gold Star marker. And that was a fun day. We probably had 100-something people at the house, all outside. And the garden club was instrumental in helping to obtain the marker. And then we set it on the lawn at the PWS house. And of course, it started out for all the mothers who lost their sons during the war. But it was a neat thing. We also have our annual Glenwood Cemetery tour.
I love that.
Yeah,
That was so
actually,
much
you
fun.
participated in
Mhm.
that. Yeah, you were actually portrayed one of the ladies who was killed
Patsy Uphold.
in
Yes.
the Wynkoff fire in 1946.
Mhm.
That was a lot of fun. I was able to write the scripts for the actors, and we met at Slices. You had drinks and hors d'oeuvres, and then you walked to the cemetery, and I was the conductor. I told a little history about Glenwood Cemetery, and then you actually got to meet the people that were there.
I thought it was wonderful
It was
and
a lot of
so interesting. I think it's something we should do every year.
We are.
Okay.
Our next one will be in October. There'll be different people that you'll get to meet, different stories. But it was a lot of fun, and their stories need to be told. I mean, it was a great day in history. It really was that day.
Yeah.
But we have different events like that. 2 months ago, I had a man, and he spoke through Zoom. He works in Washington, D.C., but he wrote a book about the bootleggers in Upson County and in Coweta County, murder in Coweta County. His grandfather was involved in that. So it was very interesting. We also showed a movie about FDR that Dan White had produced. And that was very interesting because it connected locally. And I think that's kind of what brings history home to you.
If you were to invite people to be a part of the Upson Historical Society, what would you say to them?
I would say, come join us. We have a lot of fun. They're only like $25, $30 a year. For a family, I think it's maybe 55. And that money actually goes back to the Historical Society that helps us preserve the Pettigrew White Stamps House, the African American Museum, Andrews Chapel Schoolhouse, and we have great programs. It also helps us to keep the history alive so that kids can come. We have schools that come to see the museum. The other day, a teacher from Gordon called me and she said, "Can my students come over there? I want them to write a paper." I said, "Absolutely, they sure can." So they're scheduled in the fall to come tour the house, and they're going to pick out something in the house that they like and write a story about it. So it's a great way. So, it's a great way to be involved, and it's a great way to help celebrate the history of this area. And being a historical society member it'll keep that train on the track.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us how we can join and become involved and become members.
You can come by the PWS house. You can go to the Thomaston Upson Archives and fill out a membership form, pay your dues. I'll add you to the email list, and you can see about some of the wonderful things that we're going to be doing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you for coming to talk to us. I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe.
You're welcome. Next time.